And I'd just like to welcome you all. Appreciate that you could be here. We'll interact with you as much as we can. When I started, I made my decision based on a commitment that AT&T BellTel gave me, a combination of pay and health care and pensions. And I made my commitment to them, and I fulfilled my commitment. I think we've all spent our working careers with the Bell companies that we were with. I don't feel that they have fulfilled their commitment. And just so you know, I think that's what we're about. Making sure that they do fulfill their commitment and keep their promise, because we have done our job. And that's what our organization and all that we are involved with are a party to. I do have an official function today, and that is to introduce you folks the slate of officers who will lead our association in 2025. These are all volunteers, and they're fulfilling their role. We have Tommy Sneed as chairman, Frank Bruzak is chief financial officer, Una Kelly is treasurer, Tim McManus is assistant treasurer, and I'm serving as secretary. We also have two additional board members who are an invaluable asset to our organization. One is Tom Butler, who is over here with us. The other is Laura Whitlock, who can't be with us today. Our group is a group of volunteers, and they are dedicated to what we can do and try to protect all of us. What I would like to do is have any of you think how you might be able to help us. Spot all of them, doesn't have to be full-time, things like that. If you think you'd do something, see me afterwards or any of the other folks, we'd be glad to chat with you. I do cast a vote to elect those folks. So they are now your officers for the year. I am going to turn the podium over to our chairman, Tommy Sneed.
Thank you, John. And thank all of you for coming today. Welcome. Welcome. If you ever have a problem, don't hesitate for 1 second to call our office. You'll be very happy and satisfied you did, because that's what we're there for. I mean, we exist for each other, you know, just as we seamlessly work with management and craft work together during our careers. We seamlessly work together in our retirement, not only for our retirees, but for the good of the employees still working. Whenever anything comes up, I mean, legally, like I'll give you, for instance, in 2012, when they did the first pension risk transfers of 41,000 managers to Prudential, we went to court, and we were denied, and then we went to the appellate court. Our appeal was denied, but that opened the door for us to go to the United States Supreme Court. Our petition had merit to be heard because it was a constitutional issue that affected a broad sector of the citizens of our country. So, I mean, that's our legal advocacy. We have to lobby. We have to see, ERISA is a great thing. This year, ERISA will be 51 years old. And it was a great thing when it was created, but some things fell through the cracks. I mean, 51 years ago, who ever even thought of pensions, billions and billions of dollars in pension assets being sold to insurance companies? Nobody ever thought of that back then. Well, the day has arrived that this is a mantra going on across the United States in all major companies. We also, at our corporate governance, as far as our proxy, our shareholders measures in Verizon and AT&T. And we won by over 50%. 3 proxy proposals over the years, which is a record in America. It's an absolute record. If you ever go up against a corporation, the enormous wealth and amount of money they will spend to protect, the CEO's pay and things like that, so we do this because it's not about greed. It's about what's healthy for the shareholders, for the employees, for the company, our company that we built, that we managed, that we maintained, and that we operated for over 100 years. We know more about it than, the board of directors. We do that every year. We've had 8 other proxies that the Verizon said, hey, look, we'll change our metrics. We'll mediate with you. We'll meet you in the middle. If you remove this proxy, we promise to implement your metrics on how we should perform as a corporation. And we have. We sat down with them, we don't want to show you any harm. If you want to come and be responsible to your employees and your shareholders and your retirees, we'll remove our proxy, which we did 8 times. So this year we're going to be, the Verizon shareholders meeting is going to be virtual. And in a way it's good because people can all view it. But in a way it's bad because you're not live and you can't stand up and put the CEO's feet to the fire. You know what I mean? You don't get a chance to personally talk. So that's going to be on May 22nd. And our Chief Financial Officer, Frank Bruzak, will be making our proxy presentation. And it's on the lead cables, tens of thousands of miles of lead cables in America. Some are underwater, some are buried, some are overhead, some are in conduit and manholes. And a large portion of this lead that was placed as far back as 1910, 1920 is no longer working. But the toxic substance that it is still permeating our environment. And especially bad for young children. So our proxy proposal is to ask Verizon, please measure everything, map everything out, and report to the shareholders on your remedial actions on what you're doing to safeguard good old United States. So we also have media and messaging. If an issue comes up, most people don't even know it's an issue, but if it involves telecommunications or any holistic thing that would improve the life of Americans all across the country, we're on it. We address it. First, we make the public aware of it, and then we find a solution. We think about the best solution there is for it. So we're a multifaceted company. Although we started in 1997 for the management and craft of the old, New York, the 9X, we're now an advocate for all Americans, especially after ERISA has been compromised by pensions being sold. Now, some of you may have recently received a packet in the mail, and it should look like this, and it's on the pension death benefit, formerly known as the accident and sickness death benefit, and it's based on, for New York State, my salary from 1986, January 1st, December 31st, 1986. And on the 3rd page, it has certificate holder's name, Thomas M.C., date of birth, a unique customer identification number, and death benefit amount. It was alignment at the time. It didn't include any overtime. It did include, if you worked evening, 10%, that was included in your base salary. So you all should have, if you live in New York State, should have all gotten this packet in the mail. And I have to admit, we developed a dialogue with Prudential. Actually, we met with Prudential down in Manhattan. Myself, Frank Bruzak, Don Kaufman. They were very open and honest. Every question we asked them, whether they had the answer we wanted to hear or they had the answer we didn't want to hear, at least they told the truth. And that's all we asked for. So we know how to go about rectifying things. And this document in itself, them telling everybody, hey, look, let your spouse know you have this benefit. Because when you're not around, you can't tell them. I mean, they can always call us, we will. And this is different from the life insurance. The life insurance was based on the salary we had in the last year of employment. But it's reduced starting at age 66, 10% a year until we reach 70. So using inverse compound interest, it amounts to about 48% of our last year's salary. All right. So hopefully you all got this, or else you can call Prudential. Some states we have Reinsurance Group of America, all right, RGA, and Verizon split the pension funds up between Prudential and RGA. So that's a very important thing for people to know, because for years this was almost a secret in NYNEX and Verizon, because if you didn't know about it and you didn't claim it within 1 year, it reverted back to the company. They kept it, 100% of it, they kept it. It was not negotiated with the unions. It was only negotiated with Attorney General Baxter and AT&T and our Harold Green, the judge, that overruled. Those three parties, that was it. Nobody else was included. So it's a good thing to know, good thing to keep with your will and your personal documents, just in case. Years ago, Verizon sold landline services to Frontier Communications for $10.5 billion. Well, fast forward to today, they just bought it back for $20,000. Billion. Billion.
With a few zeros.
Yeah, 3 zeros, yeah, what the heck. These are all on states where they had state franchises, California, Texas. They had wall-to-wall fiber approval. Now, AT&T has announced they want to end all landlines by 2029. So we got on the topic right away. February 20th, I emailed and mailed a hard copy from our office on February 20th, condemning their attempt to remove landline service, because nobody knows the business better than the telephone people know the business. And sure enough, 2 days later, AT&T's wireless networks went down in Florida, Texas, the entire state of California, and the Chicago metropolitan area. 2 days later, after I emailed the commissioner and the 5 public utility members. And at that time, the Public Safety Agency of California said, if you got a 911 emergency, use your landline. Because we know if America goes dark, our central office generate our own power, and our phones will still work. It'll be the last electronic thing in America still working. So, it is a true lifeline, landlines, and, The California Public Utility Commission told AT&T, no, you cannot end landlines in California. Rather than going through 50 state public utility or public service commissions, they went right to the chairman of the Federal Communications. And they're getting blanket, it looks like they're going to get blanket approval across United States. They changed their strategy and their approach to this, which, federal is the law of the land, So, but we're still staying on top of that, and we're still concerned about it. I'm going to hand you over to our Chief Financial Officer, Frank Bruzak. Good morning, everybody.
So I had a good career, and I think many of you might step back and say, yeah, we've had good careers also. I think they were, to me, good days with the company. When I left the company happy. So I had a nice career. Then when I really retired, that's when I decided, let me give back a little bit. So now I'm the newbie in this organization. I have 3 years in this organization. And I was just a board member, but then I got lassoed into being the Chief Financial Officer, which I enjoy. But the one thing about one of my main roles as being the Chief Financial Officer is maintaining the health of the organization. If we move forward, I mean, cover our proxies, part 2. And some of this was mentioned by Tommy. The big thing now, we had put on the table 3 proxies. Our survived lead cable for Verizon, which I will be presenting on May 22nd. So that has survived. And the big thing about the lead cable, if we talk about lead cable, and it's been mentioned by Tommy, is that this is a major issue. We're also trying to help out other areas today, like Massachusetts. I talked with the manager who has safety in Massachusetts. He's been working on this thing, in fact, with the Wall Street Journal article back in 2023 to say, look, this is affecting the health of current employees and retired employees. People are getting blood tests that were retired, and there are high levels of lead in their system. What about their health care? What about taking care of that? And how about the current employees that have to work in the air, in the manholes with all this lead, and they're coming back and they may be cross-contaminating in their hands at home and everything else. In fact, this manager told me that if it wasn't for him trying to fight this, the current employees would not be wearing masks and the proper attire and having the proper soap to get the lead off their hands after they work with these cables, where the cables are. So what we're asking Verizon to do, look, prioritize where the stuff is, prioritize them when they're near playgrounds, or where your workers are, and get it out. Just give us a plan. Fine, it might cost up to $400 or $500 million or $1 billion, whatever, $1 million, but you're getting recycled benefit. You've got workers out there doing workers and pulling it out. Just get it out. And set the tone for the rest of the telecommunications companies. Because we realize these tens of thousands of miles are not just in Verizon territories now. We got AT&T, and we have all the other telecom companies, but set the tone, take care of the people. That's all we're trying to say. So we just hope that you support, for those of you that can support our proxy. One of the main responsibilities, I'm responsible for the 2 big E's, revenues and expense. So I'd like to just cover where we are, and my key thing is covering 2024. So if you look at our numbers for 2024, you can see the income was $493,300 approximately for the year. Most of that income, like 99% of that income, is from you. And thank you, because you make it happen. The other thing I want to make sure that everyone understands is that revenue also from our members, every dollar you give us, we try to plank right back in to things that are valued to you. Now, if you look at the expense side, you can see there our expenses were $534,300. And the big thing there is we manage every dollar and penny to its fullest. But as you know, as we see in our own family lives, inflation is hitting us, costs are higher. And the one thing I want to make clear here is that, as Tommy mentioned, and so did Don Kaufman, we are volunteers. We got 5 board member volunteers, including myself. And we only have 1.5 full-time employees working for this organization. So we're lean to mean, if you will, organization. But again, we're focused on you. That's our primary concern. It's focused on you. As an organization, we're very proud of this. And we talked about how we are very tight with our dollars. We try to manage dollars. So we're proud that we're now platinum member here. And it also says that they can identify that we're upfront with our finances. We're upfront with you as communicating what we really do with your money. So we're definitely proud of that. The other thing that's most important to me is we're a small organization, and we also could use your talents. So if there's anyone in our membership that would like to donate their skills and talents to our organization, we'd like to hear from you, just like Don mentioned. We're available now. You could call us, email us, whatever. And we're always looking for good talent that could help us along because we think we have a lot more to do. So we would appreciate that. So with that, I want to introduce A. Stone, and already you know he's our legal counsel and Retirees for Justice is his thing, and he's got a lot of good things to talk about. Thank you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been working with this association for over a decade now, and I was involved in the very first case that Curtis Kennedy brought. Most people didn't know what I was looking at then, but I was looking behind the scenes at what kind of risky practices insurance companies were engaged in. And I think it's important to clarify something that was mentioned earlier when Tommy put up a slide about Prudential. There is somewhat of a concern that I think we have to focus on with respect to Prudential. Prudential itself is a solvent, very stable company. They are. Their biggest moneymaker is a company called PGIM that has close to $1 trillion in assets under management. The insurance company that issued the group annuity contract in 2012 is not Prudential Financial Inc., the publicly traded company. It is a wholly owned subsidiary called Prudential Insurance Company of America. And looking through what Prudential Insurance Company America has taken on in liabilities and what they've done with various affiliates located in jurisdictions where they don't report, like in Arizona, and offloading liabilities to reinsurers in Bermuda, it paints an altogether different picture of risk for retirements. So that's what I spend a good deal of my time on. It all comes down to what is pension risk transfer? What is pension stripping, which this association likes to refer to? What does it all mean? Essentially, what happened is that when a defined benefit plan sponsor wants to get off risk for pensions, they do it by purchasing an allocated group annuity contract. And the pensioners become certificate holders under that group annuity contract. They don't own the contract. They just get a certificate. So really, pension risk transfer or pension stripping refers to any situation where a defined benefit plan transfers its pension liabilities to an insurance company. So in addition to kind of what happened when Curtis Kennedy first got started, way back when the transaction went down in 2012, that involved 41,000 employees, and it involved close to $8.4 billion in liabilities. Now, it's reported as a $7.5 billion transaction, but the cost was actually 8.4. There was never an official breakdown of where that went, but suffice it to say that $1 billion premium doesn't benefit the retirees. That $1 billion premium went to pay expenses, went to pay fees, and went to pay a premium to Prudential Insurance Company of America for taking on the liability. Fast forward to 2024, the most recent deal that Tommy also mentioned, that involves some pension liabilities for management. It involves a lot of pension liabilities for members of the union, for the pension plan for associates, but it also involves the sickness and death benefit. But there's been no accounting that I've been able to find that spells out how much in plan assets they took out to cover the sickness and death benefit liabilities going forward. And that's one of the things that we're very active in right now. So there's been a lot of efforts in the courts recently, but there's also been parallel legislative efforts where we're trying to change the laws so that the benefits that retirees had under ERISA get replaced with reasonably equivalent state laws. So under ERISA, retirees' pensions were protected uniformly from creditors. They got annual statements every year. The plan fiduciaries were held to the highest fiduciary standard in the land. And in addition to an annual statement, you would get other documentation about how your assets and how the assets are performing. That goes away once it's offloaded to an insurance company. Most importantly, financially, all retirees, when they're kicked out of their pension plan, lose the protection afforded by the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, which is much more significant than state guarantee associations, which are voluntary associations, and they only can raise money by assessing members. And almost every state statute has a limitation on how much you can assess your member. So the ability of a state guarantee association safety net to protect retirees is very hypothetical. So Verizon folks were involved in two deals, as we mentioned earlier. One that went down in 2012, one that went down in 2024. The one in 24 impacted a total of 56,000 retirees. And that case is called Dempsey versus Verizon / State Street Global Advisors. And that case is currently pending right now. We filed a complaint. I did it with my firm along with a law firm known as Cantor and Cantor on the West Coast. And the main attorney there, a woman by the name of Elizabeth Hopkins, formerly did appellate work at the Department of Labor and is probably the best ERISA lawyer that I've come across. So we have a complaint right now that we filed. They filed a motion to dismiss. And the biggest challenge is showing how when these pensions get transferred into annuity contracts, how does it harm the pension? And some courts have come down and said, well, there's no current economic harm because you're still getting your pension paid. But if you've ever looked at a pension statement, you look at your liabilities going out for the remainder of your lifetime, not what happens tomorrow. So the big argument that's before the courts right now that I'm very active in is showing that the loss of these benefits and placing these annuity contracts with insurance companies like the Prudential Insurance Company of America without the backstop of Prudential Financial is putting retirees' pension at risk. And I firmly believe this, and that's why I'm involved in about 7 or 8 different cases across the country. Now, there was a recent decision in the Lockheed Martin case where the court found that we had met our burden of showing current economic harm. So our big challenge is explaining to courts how the loss of these benefits, these protections, and the risk that these companies pose by engaging in risky practices puts pensions at risk. Now, the reason this is so timely and so significant is in 2024 alone, there were 4 major life and annuity company insolvencies. The insurance industry has always said, well, insurance companies never fail. Look, Prudential is the rock. Well, Prudential Insurance Company of America is not Prudential Financial. I would love to have Prudential Financial backstopping your annuity contract. And when you look at the circular nature of all of the transactions among the myriad affiliates that they have all over the world, it'll make your head spin. And that's what we're showing to the judge right now. But in 2024 alone, PHL Variable Insurance Company, known as the Phoenix Companies, was taken over and put into rehabilitation. In connection with that rehabilitation, they put in place a moratorium order that limited people's ability to pull money out of their own annuity contracts and their own life insurance benefits. I have one client has a $2 million death claim. Her husband passed away. They paid her $300,000. That was the moratorium cap. She's got 2 kids in high school. Hasn't worked in 20 years. And that's where she's left. And that was, that's one case. There's other cases where people have millions of dollars in insurance. They don't know what's going to come of it. They don't know whether they're going to get all or none of it. Other people have annuity contracts that said you could pull money out. You could take out the surrender value. No. Moratorium stopped all that. So the risk to retirees in these pension risk transfers, it's not just that the entire company has to blow up. It's that there's a regulatory disruption that prevents them from getting their pension payments when they need it. And more retirees, rely very heavily on their pension payments for their retirement. In addition to PHL Variable, which is in Connecticut, Columbia Mutual Insurance Company was placed into rehabilitation in the state of New York in 2024 as well. Columbia Mutual had a subsidiary that was located in Illinois. The Illinois company filed for rehabilitation first, and then New York jumped in. So now there are 2 competing rehabilitations and there will be significant disruptions to policy. And that's an ongoing subject that I'm on for the association. There was another failed company called Scottish Re that is actually still in rehabilitation in Delaware, even though they wound up in bankruptcy. You see, what they do sometimes is they have a holding company parent and then an insurance regulated subsidiary. So with Scottish Re, the holding company parent went into bankruptcy, but the insurance subsidiaries can't go into bankruptcy, so they went through rehabilitation. Massive disruptions, billions of dollars ultimately lost in the Scottish Re mess that folks haven't paid a lot of attention to. There's a number of other long-term healthcare insurers that got into trouble, including Penn Treaty and a company called SHIP. And basically what happened was they raised the premium and they lowered the payouts. And a lot of people said, I don't want this insurance if I got to pay this much for it. And now the benefits aren't what I expected. So that's where things are at right now on the legal front. But I don't think lawsuits are enough. I mean, it's an important thing to do to hold people to account and to expose risky practices. But what we also need to do is we have to change the laws in this country. So when you lose protections that were provided under ERISA, you should get them under state law. That doesn't cost anybody anything. It's a revenue neutral thing, but you get the same protection. So if you get in an auto accident, they can't go after your pension if they sue you. And you should get disclosure. And perhaps most importantly, the people who manage these funds for your benefit should be held to a fiduciary standard. Right now, the insurance industry takes the position that they're not fiduciaries. They essentially sold a group annuity contract to a subsidiary of Verizon. They're obligated to make payments to you, but Verizon pensioners are now intended third-party beneficiaries of a complicated annuity contract. They don't have any direct contractual rights against Prudential, and certainly not against Prudential Insurance Company of America. And by the way, if you look at any of the Prudential press releases, the last statement that you'll see on the very bottom says that Prudential Insurance Company of America is solely responsible for its group annuity contract business and its financial condition. Very last thing that's in every one of their press releases. So what we're trying to do now is try and pass laws at the state level to make sure that retirees' pensions are protected, even if after they get kicked out of their pension plan. There's obviously a big difference between state and federal protections, and we want to make the state laws more uniform. So one of the things that we've done is we've approached various different folks at various different legislatures to introduce legislation to replace those protections. And there's one such bill pending in Massachusetts right now. And this was a bill that was built off of stuff that we had done previously. And I introduced a bill in Connecticut in 2015, and then there was another one in Virginia that addressed some of these issues. And this association has been very active, and members of the board have been very active in reaching out to the legislatures to introduce these types of bills. But now we got a hot one in Massachusetts. It was introduced in January of 2025. It's a pretty comprehensive bill. It builds off of some of what we had introduced before, but it also includes provisions for third-party guarantees, reinsurance, mandatory disclosures, opt-outs for retirees, and restores creditor protections, and also is designed to prevent subsequent transfers, which is a hot issue for retirees. Let's say you have a good insurance company making your payments, and they do a deal with another company. All of a sudden, you find yourself at risk of a company that you know even less about than you knew before. But we're very positive about that, and I hope that members of the association will reach out and write letters, and I know that members of the board are already doing that. In New York, we had a bill pending every year that then got buried in the insurance committee. We're revisiting an approach to New York and working with the association's board to propose new bills. And I think it's especially important in light of the rehabilitations that took place in 2024, because now it's real, now it's live. But in New York, we always face a hurdle because there's two companies who don't like introducing pension de-risking legislation. One of them is the American Council of Life Insurers, you may know as the ACLI, and the other one is a company called Lyconi, which is the Life Insurance Council of New York. And they oppose any regulation of the pension risk transfer business. They think once it starts, it's a slippery slope and they'll become over-regulated. One of our goals is to get an amendment to ERISA passed. Tommy Steed mentioned earlier that ERISA's lost some of its teeth. You know, ERISA was started when Studebaker went into bankruptcy, and all of the workers and their families lost everything. And Congress decided that's not a good thing. So in 1984, ERISA was signed into law, and it's designed to protect employees and retirees, and it's supposed to hold plan fiduciaries to the highest fiduciary standard known at law. And it hasn't been working out as well as we think that it should. And so we proposed some amendments that would restore the protective purpose that ERISA was born out of. We have reached out also to other groups like the Pension Rights Center, and we have drafted amendments to ERISA that will kind of help in the pension risk transfer context, force companies to disclose more to retirees, to explain to them how their rights are impacted, and to give them some tools. And we're going to continue to do that. And one of the other things that we put in there is we want to toll all of the statutes of limitations so people don't find out that there's a problem when it's too late to do anything about it. So that's kind of at the heart of what our legislative agenda is all about. Proud to work with this association. It's been a good decade plus, and that's all I have for today, but I know that I'm going to make myself available for questions at the end of the session. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming here. I'm Tom Butler, and I've been involved with the association since February of 1997. Back then, Bill Jones, Bob Rem, and Mike Kuklinka, three of the founders, they met with me to ask how we could help them to elevate awareness, to create a taller stage, a brighter spotlight, and more bandwidth to communicate to the countless retirees out there. We are right now working on issue 114 of the newsletter. That's a quarterly newsletter. And that shows a long, rich heritage of a lot of news and a lot of narrative, a lot of communication with the members. And that's what this association has always been. This has been for and about the membership. It's been about learning about their issues, what is most important to them, what are the problems, and how do we help dissect those problems and address those problems. I am on the side where I do some of the media and communications on behalf of the association. So when the Wall Street Journal hit a stone wall with their major investigative story about lead, they turned to us. And they worked with us, and they did a survey of more than 900 of our members to ask them intimately. And they had statisticians working on this and all types of journalists, a team that has won Pulitzer Prize journalists. And they surveyed so many of our members. And then they wound up doing extensive interviews after the survey where they actually spoke to these people. Tommy, you were one of those people. And Tom told of some of his experiences. So Wall Street Journal, this association has been on the front page and the editorial page of the New York Times. These are two of the biggest papers in the globe. We've had a feature in Time Magazine, Business Week. Fortune did a multi-page spread on this association and its strength as being aggressive advocates. Crane's New York Business did a story and an interview with Tommy a couple of years ago. They've done a couple with him, but they had a photo of him outside the building on 2nd Avenue, right down in 13th Street. And so even Public Broadcasting System, Bloomberg Television, CNBC. So the reason I bring this up is recognize that this little association that runs on volunteer power and the contributions of its members has had a remarkable footprint and has done so much and accomplished what it can. And again, to repeat Frank, you need volunteers. So if there are people who are here today, or if you have friends who you worked with in the company, maybe they retired and moved on to a second career, it's time for them to come back home and maybe play a role in whatever way they can. I know we talked about this earlier. Eddie talked about this and it was mentioned. We've gone to the United States Supreme Court actually twice because they accepted, our appeals went up twice to there. But on the proxies, who else? T. Boone Pickens wished he had a track record like we have as shareholder advocates on the proxy. So we've won 3 proxies, and those were proxy access, which is 2013, which would to allow shareholders to nominate Verizon board candidates. Shareholders gaining a say on pay for executive compensation and executive severance. And that was in 2003, which limited overly generous golden parachutes. We won 59% of the vote. 59% of the vote. One of these matters, and I think it was say on pay, it was a tie. On the day of the board meeting, it was announced to be a tie. For the media, they love a cliffhanger. They love when you go into overtime. And we went into overtime and we won. And we won. And everyone was wagging their tongues about that. But 2003, this company in its 100+ year history, we were the first person to ever knock them out. We were the first organization to ever overcome the board of directors. And so that's something to be proud of. Next part of the meeting is, I think, the most important dynamic, because this is when you get the microphone.
But what I mentioned to Eddie, and he said he'd be glad to address it. One of the things that I know Eddie and I have been talking about is when Verizon does a transfer like they did to Prudential of the pensions last year and other times, one of the things they have to do is have a financial advisor make sure that things are done copacetic on that. And they're supposed to be independent of each other. And there's some question, I think, and Eddie can elaborate more as to this last transfer, whether Verizon was really independent of the financial advisor that they used. And I'll better be quiet and not steal any more thunder or incorrect statements. Eddie, if you don't.
No, I don't mind at all, Don. Thank you. Essentially, what happens when you do a pension risk transfer is you have to appoint an independent fiduciary, and they make a recommendation. They make a recommendation about what the safest available annuity provider is. So they're supposed to choose somebody who's a safe and secure steward for the plan. Well, in the case of the recent transaction in 2024, Verizon hired State Street Global Advisors to be the independent fiduciary. And when we did some digging into their public statements, we found out, well, State Street Global Advisors owns more than $2 billion in Prudential's common stock, $500 million in RGA's common stock, and $7.7 billion in Verizon common stock. So we basically said, you can't possibly claim to be independent if you control billions. And they came back and said in their papers, well, we don't actually own the stock, we own it on behalf of our clients. But guess who votes at the proxy meetings? Guess who has the ability to weigh in on all these big corporate decisions? It's State Street Global Advisors. So that's one of the things that's front and center in this case, which is different than the other case, because we're focusing on breach of fiduciary duty and self-dealing.
Thanks, Eddie. That's all. I thought you might be interested in that. As one of the other things that we're involved with, because we support Eddie and his company in those filings.
Hi, I'm Diana Halvey. I was the first female switchwoman hired in 1981. I worked in Queens, and I met Verizon gave me my life, actually. I gave me my job, my first full-time job. They educated me. I ended up being able to go to every school in Manhattan. I went to Columbia, I went to NYU, I went to, I had a great career. They gave me my life. I met my husband there. My husband was in the Brooklyn counterpart to where I worked. We were computer techs, and I met him there, and he took early retirement in '94. He got the 6 and 6. I get half his pension now. He passed away. It'll be 12 years today. But I had a great life with him. But he used to be very involved in the court cases, and he used to always tell me, and I'm actually here today to honor him, and I'm gonna get more involved for him, actually, and for me. But I really definitely want to get more involved with the BellTel Association. The question I had is with the current administration's determination to tear down all the watchdog agencies for everyone. I'm not just BellTel, the schools, what they're determined to do to unions. How do you have any special strategies to fight them?
Great question. Obviously, it's a big concern, particularly at the Department of Labor,
Right.
where we've lost very, very big time allies. But I think that the solution legislatively now is at the state level, and the states are taking back power. And so we're going to focus more and more on introducing state legislation to replace the federal protections that were lost. We're still going to try to amend ERISA, but there's no question that the gutting of federal agencies is going to hurt and make it a little bit harder. I'm particularly concerned about the Department of Labor, because the people that they want to bring in there now just don't believe that there's any right to sue for anything done by a pension plan. They think it should be done by the plan sponsors. They think they're more experienced than any law firm could possibly be, and they want to essentially prohibit the practice. So it is a big concern, but we've got our eye on the ball. And what I like to tell people is, we live in a world of pendulums, and pendulums swing. And the further they swing one way, the further they're going to swing back. So it's just a matter of being patient, being on the ball, and pushing where you have opportunity. And I think our biggest opportunity now is at the state level.
My full name is Laura Fox Lingholm. I worked in Brooklyn, New York, as well as Staten Island. I came into the company in 1977. When I came in, I thought I was going to stay 18 months and then I was going to leave. But 40 years later, I decided it was time. I was also the first female. I started as a rep and I had a data processing degree, which in those days in the 70s was like what? And I took the ESS Mini and I was one of the first females to go into the Brooklyn and switch. My question is actually about ERISA, because I think there have been a couple of states that actually supported the legal process of maintaining ERISA for those states. However, my question is, suppose if you worked in New York and let's say I moved to one of those states, am I covered in that at that point, or do I take my New York pension? Well, now it's Prudential, and not get covered.
Basically, ERISA is a federal law signed into law by Gerald Ford in 1974. But ERISA provides uniform protections to pensioners, all sorts of, and it's all the same for everybody. Once you're kicked out of your pension plan, you default to non-uniform state laws, and the state of residence, right, where you reside at the time of the insolvency or the impairment of the insurance company that's supposed to make your payments, that's the state law that's going to govern your rights. And state laws have voluntary guarantee associations, and the coverage amounts range from $240,000 to $500,000. $240,000 is California, because they have this weird statute that says it's $300,000, but you only get 80% of the present value. So for your purposes, it's $240,000. But that's what really matters. So you do have to look at this, and that's one of the things I feel is very unfair for retirees. They move. Retirees move to be with family. And it's a per individual, per lifetime cap. So if you have another Prudential Insurance Company of America life insurance policy or annuity, and that company gets into trouble, your cap amount is per individual, per lifetime, no matter how many policies you have.
As Eddie says, the difference between what we had under ERISA and a state guaranteed pension, under ERISA, I think now, if your pension plan went insolvent, you would be guaranteed up to $80,000 a year for the next 150 years, lifetime. Under certain states, there's a cap, okay? New York State, we're one of the highest, we are the highest, $500,000. But if you're getting a $50,000 a year pension, 10 years, you've reached your cap. You'll not get another penny. So that was a big thing we lost under federal protection of ERISA. So it all depends on what state you live in. I think out in the Midwest, there's states like Missouri and Arkansas, their limit's 250,000. So if you get a $50,000 a year pension and you reside in those states, 5 years, bye-bye, no more. So that's the real critical downside to that. Did I answer that question properly, Tom?
You did. I just want to make one clarification. The PBGC that takes over a plan provides benefits based on your age. So what Tommy said before is accurate if you're 65 years of age. If you're 75, that amount goes up dramatically. So PBGC provides more than 250,000 in annual benefits for someone who's 75. 65, it's more like 80,000. But all is a function of your age when the pension plan gets taken over. So it's significantly different, and it could be even worse.
Hi, I'm Pat DiPietro. I started in 1970, working for the company, and they took me down to 811 10th Avenue to go to splicing school like Tom. I was a splicer downtown Manhattan, and after we finished splicing school, we all marched to the World Trade Center, where I worked for the next 5-6 years. And I saw it go up, I saw it come down, and I saw it go up again. So, and I worked there. I'm a 9/11. Like, I don't know if you call me a survivor, but I was a worker there, so I'm on the 9/11 thing. But it was a great job. And later on, after my splicing, I was a manager, Southern Manhattan down in Broad Street, and I went over to Empire City Subway, which was a really nice move for me. And it was so funny you're talking about lead cables. I was a quality manager there, and I went to the Verizon management and I says, guys are cutting all these cables. We need to get them out of the manholes because we can't get the other tenants. That was another thing. ECS had 75, 80 tenants you don't even know about. And they were bringing fiber cables, and fiber is not placed like lead cables. They got to come out of the truck in an environment. They got to be spliced, put back in a hole with coils. You know what these manholes look like? You have no idea. You know how spaghetti all in one hole. But you know, that was basically it for me, and it was a good experience. And I did 28 years, took the 6 and 6. But you know, I did have one concern, and counselor, I have to go to you on this. I was, you know, with all this pension stuff that came out, I was wondering why Verizon didn't come back and say the remaining pensions we're going to buy out. Was that ever an issue?
Yeah.
Sir?
Well, no, it's a really good question. I mean, look, most people don't understand how much pensions cost employers. They could have offered to buy it out from the pensioners, but they didn't because they felt it would be easier for them to transfer the assets from the pension plan, get off risk, don't have to pay PBGC premiums anymore, and don't have to make their minimum required contributions, which are set under ERISA. And that's the big thing that they're trying to get out of. So if they bought, you know, because they have to contribute a lot of money every year, and it's set by statute. So that's the big thing they're trying to get away with. But there would be nothing to prevent them from buying out the pension. They could have offered a lump sum option to everybody. They have to do it uniformly under ERISA, but they could have. But they chose instead to do a deal with one of their cronies. They require fixed premiums. Everybody contributes per individual. I think it's at $105 per individual plan participant. Now, it's been going up over the years. But if the plan falls below a certain funded status, they're subject to variable rate premiums as well. And that gets set by a complicated calculation, but it could be hundreds of millions of dollars.
I just want to go to something that Pat brought up. There's a law that was signed by Governor Kathy Hochul of New York called the 9/11 Notice Act. 9/11 Notice Act. And she signed it on 9/11 of 2023. And what that says is if you were an employer who had staff who was assigned to work down there, even if you just did a couple of hours rotation here or there, it's required that the company notify you that you have an opportunity and a right to be covered by the federal 9/11 Act. There's a Droga Health Act, and that means healthcare and compensation. Or somebody to get cancer, and they were down there. There's 69 different cancers that are recognized by the federal program, which is administered by the United States Justice Department. So there's no monkey business going on with it. And if a lawyer registers you, they don't get a third. They're only allowed 10%. But how do you go in and how do you prove that you were there? Well, you have to have two colleagues vouch for you that they were there with you, they were a supervisor with you, or you have to have your employer to say, yes, this person was assigned to work at Pearl Street. Yes, this person was assigned to work at West Street, or they did rotations through there to survey the damage of West Street, or that. All of those covered zones, there are thousands upon thousands of people, maybe tens of thousands of people who work for this company, who work for AT&T, who are likely eligible. So we're coming up upon the 24th anniversary. So what I'm just saying is, if any of you were down there, if you worked at Pearl Street, if you worked at West Street, if you did any rotations through there, whether it was a week's worth of work, whether it was a month or month's worth of work, protect yourself, protect your family. And if you have a friend or a loved one who may have already, who meets that criteria and may have already passed on, their family might be eligible for compensation for the pain and suffering. And the reason they did this is Congress put this in place to keep the court systems from being clogged up. And so, I want to mention that. So Pat, thanks for bringing that up.
My husband worked for JP Morgan. He worked on Wall Street, and he died of pancreatic cancer. So I wasn't sure what to do, but everyone kept telling me, oh, you should call Barish and McGarry. They kept advertising it on the radio. So I did, and it took me like, I guess 4 years ago, but I'm supposed to get the award next month.
I always appreciate these sessions and everyone coming out. I think what's important, I think also the organization, is we want to hear from you. What's on your mind? So if you have anything that's really burning, and even if you disagree with some things we're doing, that's also important to us also, saying, I think you're a little off track with this. That's what we want to hear. So I think it's part of us being a community of members in this organization. We're into the media stage now with, obviously, social media, right? So we rely on that, and we're trying to get younger folks involved that are just retiring also to try to be part of this community. So he does a wonderful job there, and your word of mouth, I think, is important. That's what we want to say, and I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Well, and for a closing statement, I have two things, okay? Number one, every one of you knows somebody that works currently for the company or is retired from the company. One gentleman, Pat, you have two sons, all right, that work for the company. Hey, send them over to me. I'd love to see them on the board of directors, volunteer. And that goes for the rest of you. If somebody's retired and a little bit bored and they want action, bring them to our think tank. Let them tell us what their thoughts are, because it's a collection of, Bell system experience, and that's what we work on. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming, and most of all, I want to thank you for supporting each other, supporting us, because if we don't take care of ourselves, nobody else will. And I really appreciate all of your donations to the association, because without you, we couldn't do nothing. Thank you. Thank you very much.